And this will just be on the audio of the. Actually, it won't. I'll be reading it out. It's just a narrated documentary. The, the cursor keeps jumping around. It's got a mind of its own. Actually, I can't find this documentary. It doesn't seem to be on YouTube anymore, if that's where it came from. Since the founding of Buddhism 2,000 years ago, the religion has fostered a unique culture in the subcontinent of Central and South Asia, a culture in which Pali scriptures, the gathas, and monasteries present eternal themes. In Manchou Man, village Xinjiang in China's Yunnan province, there's an old man called Kala Langchao who can often be seen making his way to a grove outside the village where he can takes leaves from palm trees. He boils the leaves, drives them under the sun, and amazingly made carves Buddhist scriptures into them. What he's working on is Pali leaf scriptures. This craftsman is inscribing what scriptures has been practiced for at least 1,000 years. In its time before the invention of paper, people discovered that when properly treated, the leaves of the pali tree, a sacred tree in Buddhism, were waterproof and insect resistant. So they developed the tradition of inscribing these leaves with Buddhist scriptures. Making Buddhist scriptures is an ancient craft that is one now facing extinction as modern printing techniques are increasingly used to print Buddhist scriptures. Some of Kang Lao's Pali scriptures will be presented to the temple at the request of the villagers, but Master Tourist added in a culture with which they are unfamiliar. Unfamiliar. The craft of copying scriptures faces extinction in Cambodia, but Barya is a Buddhist monk. During the war years in the 1970s, numerous Pali scriptures in Cambodia were destroyed, and today, familiar techniques required to produce them are becoming fewer and fewer. In this capacity, as Bhararati Temple teaches temple monks and laymen how to copy scratches of scriptures onto the leaves. Meanwhile, others are working hard to save ancient Pali scriptures that have been more or less preserved to the present age. While Cambodians are engaged in reconstruction, they're also in need of rebuilding their spiritual life. As Pali scriptures are repositories of the invaluable historical and cultural information, rescuing that survived the war has come an urgent task. After the war, Prem War made a living by making Pali after he had to study Buddhist scriptures. One day, a foreign tourist asked him if he knew anything about Buddhist scriptures written on Pali leaves. It was an encounter that would leave Lingan along the path of saving the ancient Pali scriptures. He began to search for Pali scriptures in the hope of extracting the historic and cultural information contained in them before they were reduced to ashes. Recorded in Pali scriptures are not only Buddhist doctrines, but also legends and records of historical events. And so the study of Pali scriptures is important documents, as in the study of the history of the various countries of the sub-region. Over the last dozen years, Ling Goran and his colleagues have visited 88 temples in Phnom Penh and Kendal provinces in search of Pali scriptures. As part of this quest, at present they're going from village to village in the rural areas of Kong Pong Cheng province. And in each house they visit, they will search every corner, even under the stairs. And as soon as they find any Pali scriptures, they immediately sort through them with care. The members of the temple, they explain the importance of the Pali scriptures to the temple monks. After many years of war, numerous Pali scriptures disappeared from public sight and does not know what happened to them. Ling Gorhan and his colleagues urge the temple monks to preserve the palm leaf scriptures as well, so that they can exist for future studies. Some villagers in Kong Cham province have told Ling Gorhan a story about some Pali scriptures. It seems that one night, around 20 years ago, I was approaching a village in Kampong Chen province. The village's temple was learned one monk who knew the value of the Pali scriptures in his care. And so he asked the villagers to move the Pali scriptures out of the temple and hide them in their houses. These ancients saved the scriptures from destruction. But then Ling Goran arrives at the temple, Tera village. He finds that the monk has already been dead several years. He pays respects to his preserved remains. At that time, the venerable monk had great courage to take the action he did, and the villagers still talk about his deeds as of telling a story from the Buddhist scriptures. Because of the monk's foresight, Tera Temple has been able to preserve a huge quantity of Pali scriptures. It is, in fact, the largest collection of them that has been seen in the 17 years engaged in this sort of thing. Contain many classics from which we can learn from many strange stories. They are reference materials for our studies. In Sanskrit, the word for pagoda means tomb, reflecting the fact that the original function of Tera mosques was to retain the ashes of the relics of the Buddha. After Shakyam died, 8 were built in India to retain his relics. During the reign of King Ashok, the ashes and relics of Buddha were divided into 84,000 portions, and pagodas of the same color were built to retain and preserve them. With first, the pagodas became a spiritual symbol of Buddhism, and as Buddhism was introduced to other regions, large numbers of Buddhist pagodas began to appear. In this sub-region, the architecture of Buddhist pagodas reached its zenith. The most famous group of pagodas is to be seen in Pagan, built of bricks in the 11th century. More than 2,000 of these Buddhas stand along the Ayawadi River over an area of 4,000 square kilometers. Here, a Buddhist temple serves not only as a venue for religious activities, but also as a museum, school, theater, hospital, and market. People are late for the temple and almost linked to the temple with almost all aspects of their lives, from weddings, works, doing business, and even settling conflicts among neighbors. Moreover, all major festivals are seated around the temple, to say nothing of many solemn prayers offered there. Within this area, every village has its own best Buddhist temple and pagoda. While it is true they are religious sanctuaries, they are also. Sorry, I move on because the documentary is quite long, but it gives you an introduction about. There's a question. Gives you an introduction to subjects and an appreciation of like how ancient what we're dealing with is. These are images I've collected which represent the one of the main aims, which is cultivation. So the cultivation of wisdom, the cultivation of purity, and the recognizing of what is meant by defining of what is meant by unwholesome, the prevention of any more unwholesomeness re-arising, because those all cause suffering and they cause cloudiness of life. They cause mistakes as well. They're going to have dark consequences, troublesome consequences, chaotic consequences, disharmony and disorder. So the basic truth that the Buddha was originally teaching was this truth of suffering, which is all those I just described: sorrow, distress, pain, angst, existential suffering, as well as loss and this kind of suffering. So preventing that from arising, the Buddha defined craving as the main cause for this, wishing for things to be otherwise, and being separated from what we love, and being with what we don't love. So these things, the Buddha said, we're trying to cultivate qualities which enable us to be with what is, to have equanimity and calm with the way things actually are, and to gain insight and wisdom into the causes of our suffering. So we're going to look at some of those things today. Just say this is imagery, so we can start to look to what's meant by the inner teachings, the inside of the teachings, not only the form. We've just seen some things about the ancient form and its history. So there are tools which enable us to go deeper into the teaching. So I'd like to share some of those with you, but we need to define what it is that we are talking about. So one of the things is to define what is meant actually by defilements a little bit deeper, because defilements are the things that spoil. And here we have some recognizable types of badness, of just polluted type behavior and polluted actions, killing. So the main 5 precepts that should be kept and are taken on by us ourselves, and therefore life gets better for us and everyone else. When we protect other people, firstly, is not to kill and act harmlessly. Second is not to steal and not to take that which is given because of the distress it causes. So these are called by hate and greed. This is adultery and all the types of cruel conduct with sensuality, including rape and pedophilia and all the different kinds of immoral, cruel conduct with regard to sense pleasure. Then there's speech, lying, and misinformation. And it's not the only one. There are four kinds. Another is gossip, gossip, and also making false allegations, which causes great distress. So, also foul language and abusive speech, and just using foul language. And then nonsense talking, just empty, rambling nonsense that it doesn't benefit anyone. Then there are things such as covetousness, like clinging onto objects, and then maliciousness, just cruel conduct, and just nasty behavior like this. Then we have also various different kinds of hatreds, the various different kinds of covetous love as well, delusion and pride. So these are recognizable things which cause confusion, which cause us to feel lost, which cause us to feel arrogant and superinflated and having wrong views. So clarifying and purifying about all these helps us to be free of illusions and see ourselves as we actually are instead of heading off into nowhere, chasing dreams that don't really exist. So it's very much a path which is pragmatic and realistic and encourages people to shed wrong views and then to find the right path. This Noble Eightfold Path leads to liberation. So all of these were clarified by the Buddha and with techniques of meditation. So before we go on to cover all of those, just a little thing I want to share with you that also brings the teachings more to life. And I've got a lot of material that I'd like to share, so forgive me if I'm going to take a little bit of a sampler from each, little bit to that people can also then get an appetite for wanting to investigate it for further. So we're going to get a little bit bookish now and look at a couple of things. I want to have a look at the basic Buddhism to show you what kind of things are involved with that. So when we study Buddhism, what is it that we actually start to look at? So some of these kind of studies are very important, there's a famous sutta which is called the Mangala Sutta. Mangala means good fortune. So what kind of things to do in order that the next autumn, next spring, next summer are going to be happy ones? So blameless deeds and what that means, and thinking about disadvantages and taking intoxicants, what is meant by a respectable person, so that you associate with them and avoid fools, and what's meant by a fool, what's meant by wise. So for example, fool, you might be being very judgmental, but it's not actually an unuseful thing to do. So like if someone is a gangster or a playboy or a playgirl that's going to ruin your reputation and pull you off into wasting your time, and for example, or if somebody is a gangster and they love to fight and they'll encourage you to be someone who gets into gangs and fighting, we all probably have crossed paths with either those people or friends of friends who take people off and basically encourage them in the defilements, which we had a quick look at. So if they encourage hate in them, or if they encourage greed or desire or excessive passion in them, will take them away from peacefulness. Then these two things, if it increases ego in them to really make them inflated in these ways. So these are the kind of things we look for. People encourage gambling in their friends as well. So these are the kind of studies that make studying Buddhism a clear science as well. It should be a science of cause and effect, according to the way that the Buddha taught. So these are really clarified here. What is the Buddha? What is Dharma? What is Sangha? What is Buddhism? And they're given very nice and stable, straightforward answers, like what actually are the 5 precepts when you're taking on those 5 rules in detail, and why, what's the consequences of not following them? 8 precepts or more, 9 precepts, and so on. So these are guidelines that also are very suitable for lay people. It's not only for monks and nuns and people living in monasteries, but people in cultures that we've seen, such as Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, and Sri Lanka, and so on. They will be very familiar with what is meant by, like, what were the 9 special qualities of the Buddha that made him so very different? Or what were the 6 special qualities of the Dharma? So studies like this one, which are freely available, are very, very useful to have a good look at, so that we have a good grounding before getting into too much deep Dharma, deep teachings, deep meditation, in order to have a good, stable understanding of also what's expected of a layperson, and what benefits can be achieved. So you've got all these kind of benefits of almsgiving, benefits of generosity, the 4 practices of harmony. People finally, they got very strenuous home situation. These kind of things are good looking at. So very clear guidelines, often enumerated, numbered like this, which makes them easy to remember. So this is just a quick look at that, because we've got quite a few things to look over. I like to divide the time over the step by step. Let's have a quick look at the King Milinda's questions and see a kind of things that are said in that. So King Milinda goes up to this monk Nagasena. They exchange friendly greetings, took his respectfully to one side, and then Milinda says to himself, "What is your name, and what are your name?" "I am a king. I am known as Nagasena." Critically, it says that, but that is only a designation in common use, for no permanent individual can be found. This is one of the main teachings of the Buddha, that although we have a past and a present and a future, there's no we which is continually goes on and on and on. We feel like there is, but that when we examine closely now into experience, we can't find this one individual. We just find change and a process which is changing and changing and changing. And this is what the Buddha started to focus in on as looking for truth, right? That the Milinda called one of the Bactrian Greeks and the monks to bear witness. And he says, this is all of his entourage who come with him. And he says, this Nagasena, this monk says that no permanent individual is implied in his name. Is it possible to approve of that? Then he turned to Nagasena. He's going to take him apart and said, if by most venerable Nagasena that is true, who is it that gives you robes, food and shelter? Who lives the righteous life? Or again, who kills beings? Who lives the righteous life? Or again, who kills living beings, steals? So it means there's no criminals then who commit adultery. Who is it? If there's no one, nobody did anything, who tells lies, takes strong drink? So then he goes on, you say that you are called Nagasena. Now, what is that Nagasena? Is it the hair of the head that is Nagasena? Like your hairstyle? I don't say that, great king. Are you the nails, the teeth, the skin, or the parts of the body? Are you those things? Are you your ribs? Are you your back? Are you a shoulder? Certainly not. Or is it the feeling, the body feelings? Is it the perceptions that is Nagasena? Is it the mind states? Is it all these things combined, or is it something outside of them that is Nagasena? It is none of these. Then ask as I may, I can discover no Nagasena. Nagasena is an empty sound. Who is it we see before us? Is it a falsehood that your reverence has spoken? So then the Nagasena, who's been sitting quietly listening, says, you, sir, have been reading great luxury as becomes your noble birth. How did you become here, in a chariot or by foot? Then explain, sir, what is that? Is it the axle? Is it the wheels? Is it the chassis or the reins? or the yoke that is the chariot? Is it all of them combined, or is it something apart from them? It is none of these things, Venerable Sir. Then this chariot is an empty sound. You spoke falsely when you said you came here in a chariot. You are a great king of India. You are afraid of. Who are you afraid of, that you don't speak the truth? Then he called upon those same Greeks that were standing around and the monks to bear witness. This King Milinda said that he came in a chariot, but when asked what it is, he's unable to show it. Is it possible to prove of that? He's doubled him back again. And then the 500 Bactrian Greeks shouted their approval and said to the king, get out of that if you can. Twisted him into his corner. Venerable Sir, I have spoken the truth. It is because I have all these parts that it comes under the term chariot. Very good, sir, your majesty has rightly grasped the meaning. Even so, it's because of the 32 kinds of organic matter in the human body and the 5 aggregates of being that I come under the term Nagasena. As it was said by Sister Vajira in the presence of the Buddha, the Blessed One, just as it is by the existence of the various parts that the word chariot is used, just so is it that when aggregate of being are there, we talk of a being. Most wonderful Nagasena, most extraordinary, you have solved this puzzle, difficult though it was. If the Buddha himself were here, he would approve of your reply. King Milinda went up to Nagasena, said, exchange greetings, and went off. So that's the kind of touche, ding, 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 kind of, that all through this, they have these kind of debates where they tease out and try to find out what's the truth. So I made some, they're a very important thing. I made some slides to show you in order to help to understand the core teachings. I'll have a look through these. The core teaching mainly the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 5 aggregates, and the 12 steps of dependent origination, which means nothing when you say it just like that. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, it means this. When you're going to try to establish mindfulness in your own experience so that your mind is clear enough to know, is it causing trouble? Does it have anger? Does it have desire? Does it have ego? It must know that, and that's what mindfulness does. Then it can start to read its own weather. It can start to tell, is the mind in trouble? Is it still? Is it calm? Am I doing well? Am I causing trouble? Or something like this. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness is a way to be able to practice and look into our experience and clearly see it. Same with the 5 aggregates. Means we can, when it says there's no self, what does that mean? Well, it means we can look into the meaning of body, and then we can see a self there. Within, can we look into the feelings and find a self there within, or is it all just changing? Can we look into our perceptions and training and find, is there a self in there, or is it also just changing? The states of mind, like doubts, like there may be doubts right now, but earlier on you felt good, or you might feel really good now, but earlier on you have doubts, anxiety, or calm, these states of mind that change. It's just one of them. You've got 1 or 2 of them. There's many of these states of mind. And also in what we see, are we the one who sees? Or are we the one who hears? Are we the one who thinks? Can we find one, a real one, that's in there? So built up some useful ways of looking at that. So one of the ones is this map. Is the map, it's a little bit busy when you first see it. Very quickly here. Repeat, this is body, so your awareness lands on the body and finds that you're standing, or it finds that you're sitting, or it finds that you're blinking, or sniffing, or coughing, or it finds that there's hardness there, just where you're pressing down. It finds there's temperature there. So these are the kind of undeniable things that we're basing on. So the awareness goes there. And awareness comes from this mind states, attention, and a focal area. So the focal area looks and it finds, oh, I'm standing, or I'm sitting, or I'm blinking, or I'm sniffing, or swallowing. All these things we find where it finds that there's breath going in and out at the nose, where it finds out there's sponginess in the body, where the muscles are, or the fat is, squashing, where it finds there's movement. Okay, so there are the kind of things that we are meant by body. Just a brief outline. Let's skip over to number 2. So the awareness, when it looks into our experience, we might find it's irritated feeling. We're not feeling very comfortable in the body. Or we might feel nice, air conditioning, and we'll feel very pleasant, or a bit unpleasant. And it changes. And all day long, we've got this variety of feelings on the body, either on the skin or inside, just our mood of the body moving up and down, mood of the mind. Or you can look in, we're feeling irritated, sort of angry about what someone said to us, or still excited about what's going to happen later, or feel deeply disappointed or troubled. Can't put your finger on why. So this is the feelings level, body and mind. And then this colossal, great big group here. Basically, this part of it is perception. So it's judging, assessing, identifying, just saying this is a wood, this is a light, this is a monk, this is a curtains, this is a chair. Basics, just basically identifying and then comparing things, remembering things. So when you read, you're using it, investigating and perceiving and misperceiving. Things you can see someone, is that my soulmate? Is that an enemy? Is that who's that stranger over there? So all different kinds of things. A policeman? No, it's not, it's a dog. So sometimes make mistakes and sometimes not. Then we have the mind states, always active since we're waking, focal area. So even when you wake up first thing, you're hearing, even you didn't even open your eyes. You hear birds chirping and dogs barking, coffee grinder, or attention, intention. So these are the kind of things that we start to get aware of and start to realize what we've already got these. And they can pay attention to the body. They can pay attention to the eye and seeing, hearing, and ear, nose and smelling, taste and thinking. Loads of different types of thinking. Thinking like planning. You can be aware that we're planning. We can be aware that we're thinking of a person. It's thinking all about her, him. We can remember things that you heard in a movie. You can be thinking of places. Okay? Stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing when we start to meditate, always you start to get aware of, because it's this just based on our experience. There's no blind faith or belief in anything. And this is all based on your own experience. So this is about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first one, this one, body, is also called kaya in old language, in the ancient language of the Buddha. So I just want to show you how we have experience which is made up of bits and pieces, actually. When we look in, we're aware of our shoulder, we're aware of our knees, we're aware of our ankle or foot, we're aware of the head shape of our jaw, we're aware of a bit of our nose, and our experience changes around. And that's called impermanence. So it works a bit like this. So we have experiences coming and going. And and these are made up of these 4 things: hardness and softness, temperature, coolness and warmth, sponginess, which is where it's not actually bone, but it's actually muscle, fat, and so on, and liquids, and movement. So just movement of the stomach, moving in and out, movement of our limbs. So those overlap the 4 things that are represented to mean those. So you can zoom in on anywhere internally in your body, and you find those 4 things clustered up together somewhere, but changing. So there they are. Those are called the 4 elements. So all around the body, you find those coming and going. And that's all we find. And then Vedana means pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Pleasant feeling, but later on it moves and it changes and it's unpleasant. Unpleasant feeling, it changes and then it's pleasant. So all the time we get this, a neutral. And then we also have a breath, which will always confined there. It's going in and out. And we don't make any assumption about that. We don't say that the breath is the soul. As Nagasena points out, somebody says to him, the soul is the breath, and the breath is the soul. He says, what about trumpet players when they blow out the tune? It doesn't come back in again. He goes, well, does the self vanish off then? Points us out that you can't find a permanent self. So the body just breathes because it breathes. It's just like bellows. That's just it. We don't assume more than that. The posture as well, just are you sitting, are you standing? It's not you, it's just what the body's doing. It's one or the other and it changes. Feelings, perception, And then these two, the focal area, the intention, and just the basic battery pack. Like this computer can't work without a battery. We can't work without this facility as well, called the life pulse, just the brain rhythm, the heart pulse. But you could have a coma, they're still going, but there's nothing there. So it's just basically like a battery pack of the body. Mindfulness and unmindfulness. Always when you are separated from your object in some way, unmindfulness is there. If desire is there, you haven't got what you want. So unmindfulness is there. Always with mindfulness, if you're feeling mindful and your mind has a mind, you are content and you're collected and calm with what is. So that's one difference. Unmindfulness is always associated with agitation. And mindfulness is always associated with calm. Sometimes we have half a second of one, half a second of another, 10 seconds of the other one, and then the other one, changing. But always the middle four, always on the go. Awareness of seeing, awareness of hearing. So sometimes you might be aware of the sound of the fan or a dog barking. Sometimes you're not aware of it at all. You're off thinking, and then you come back to it. Sometimes you wonder what's going on with the projector. I always know what's going on and I'm always in control. I'm going to plug it in again. That's okay. Okay, that's the end.